So if you've been around my channel for a bit, you may have heard me play some crazy stuff. You may even be wondering, what's going on here? I've had a few requests to do a video like this, so I thought I'd break down one of my arrangements of All the Things You Are. Now, before I get started with this video, I want to thank you for almost 2,000 subscribers. Just a year ago, I was just starting this channel and writing these arrangements, and I've excited to see what the next year brings us. So let's take a look at this chart. So the first thing I want to mention is sort of the large form approach that I took to this chart, which is to start out with rendition of the intro and use that as sort of an interlude between each variation chorus of the melody. And as you'll see later in the chart, there is one time where I actually use a different interlude to sort of spice it up, keep it a little different. But largely, I use this introduction as an interlude verbatim. On top of that, each melody chorus has a new little twist to it. So let's start with the introduction. So the first thing to talk about is how this relates to the original intro. And this variation is just fast. It's in 7/4. And the biggest difference is in the crazy Barry part that I've written. It's just fast, rhythmic, lots of weird things to sort of throw you off, but keep that original intent of the intro. And then as that's going in a fast 7/4, you have the sharp 9 chords and the altos and tenors. One thing I do want to mention about this Barry part is I've written the Barrys in octaves. Different ways that I sort of approach writing Barry parts in a situation like this. One, which I rarely ever use, which is to write them in unison so they're both playing the exact same part, exact same notes. Another is to write them in perfect fifths and move them along like that. In this particular instance, I chose to write them in parallel octaves. So they're all moving the same part, same notes, same rhythm, but an octave apart. And the reason for that is I wanted to add a little bit of extra power, which the octaves and the fifths can get. But sometimes the fifths can lose a little bit of the clarity of the line, and I wanted to keep the clarity of the line. Similar to the Barry part, I wrote these sopranos in octaves. This counter line is just sort of to give it a little motion, keep it very rhythmically interesting. So now let's listen to the first chorus of the melody. So the first two A sections of this is really just trying to throw the listener and the player off rhythmically. One of the tricks I like to use is to play with expectations a bit, where you set up the melody as if it's going to follow a certain pattern, and then either delay it a little bit or anticipate it a little bit, just to throw the listener off just a little bit, keep it interesting. Implies sort of like a 3/4 feel, but with a lot of hiccups. Harmonically, it's just chord progression, nothing fancy, no fancy substitutions. A little chromatic passing motion here and the end of the 6/4 bar. And then for the bridge, I wanted to add a little variety, as bridges often do. So leading into the bridge, I sort of established time a little bit better. All these parts in the bridge keep time fairly well, even though they're a bit rhythmically interesting. Some 4 against 7, you have an 8 against 7, a 5 against 3, 4 against 3, lots of rhythmic stuff to still obscure the time a little bit, but it definitely feels like it's in time. Then we get to the last A section of the melody chorus. It's really just a call and response here with the altos playing the melody in unison, and then the rest of the saxophones playing the melody harmonized. And then a little bit of rhythmic trickery here. And then strong time feel right before we get to the next interlude again, which is verbatim from the introduction, but starts right on the soprano melody. So for this melody chorus, I definitely started out trying to establish that 7/4 feel a lot stronger, sort of counteract the rhythmic trickery of the earlier parts of the chart. So I did embellish the melody here a bit in the tenor, just slight embellishments in the melody to make it a little bit interesting, so it's not just jumping around all over the place like the melody normally does. Altos and baries are mostly just hidden chord tones with a little bit of passing notes. Trying to really establish that 7/4 feel. And then we go into the bridge, and we're definitely going for a bit of variety in this bridge again, obscuring the time a little bit, especially with these bari notes that just don't seem to line up in a predictable fashion, with more colorful harmonies on top of it. And then trying to come out of that, finding a way to establish time a little bit, with a short 4/4 section to really establish the time very clearly. And then a very straightforward approach to the last A section here. Then we get into this different interlude. So this section here is different from the interludes we've been using before in the introduction. For a little bit of variety, I felt that if I were to add that same intro again, it would sound really monotonous and kind of uncreative. So took the same idea of that introduction and took a different spin on it. Started out really quiet, which is I think a bit different from most of the chart, and then sort of build into this climactic last chorus. So it's this 4-bar pattern of 3 bars of 7/4 and then a bar of 6/4 going between the two chords. Bari parts come in playing that introduction bass line, and then this sort of building cluster soprano part that sort of helps add tension and build and rise to the end. But we get to this part right here. It feels like it's the climax, but it's not quite. Very hectic call and response between the baries and the rest of the saxophones, where the baries are moving down chromatically and the rest of the saxophones are moving in fourths, very similar to the melody. And then they come together for this big forte piano crescendo into the last melody chorus. So another call and response section. You have the sopranos playing the melody, and then the rest of the saxophones sort of responding, filling in the silences a bit, adding some rhythmic interest. Not quite obscuring the time feel. It still feels like there's a definite chord note pulse, even if the time signature may not be quite so obvious. And for the second part of the melody switches over to the alto harmonized on down through the saxophones, with the response being in the sopranos this time. And then leading into this bridge, which you may recall is very, very similar to the second chorus's bridge, with one notable exception being that alto 1 is playing with soprano 1 rather than the two sopranos. And then this last part of the melody chorus is sort of supposed to sound more comfortable. I'm not trying to obscure the time as much, but still being very rhythmically interesting. Then how I resolve the melody is kind of interesting. So you have the melody going up in the sopranos, and then the sopranos stay up on that high note, and then the melody finishes in the alto 1 part, which goes over a little bit into this last interlude section, which is a direct copy of the intro, and then it's just a big long build until this last final chord, and that should be the chart. This chart is for sale, link down below. I also have a bunch of other charts for sale through Sheet Music Plus. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe. If you want me to do more of these or have any requests, leave a comment and let me know what you think. I have some exciting videos to come. I'm looking forward to sharing them.